In the churning maelstrom of the Force, where destiny hangs on singular choices, there exists a moment of perfect corruption. Deep within the Sith Citadel on Exegol, Rey Palpatine faced her birthright. Instead of rejecting the throne of the Sith, instead of choosing the light, she embraced the darkness that sang in her blood. This is the galaxy that choice created, where the last Skywalker and the last Palpatine united not in light, but in shadow, forging an empire that would make the stars themselves tremble. Lightning crackled through the ancient Sith Citadel on Exegol, illuminating the grotesque machinery that suspended Emperor Palpatine's decaying form. The air itself seemed to vibrate with malevolent energy as Rey stood before the throne of the Sith, her lightsaber trembling in her grip. Around her, thousands of hooded cultists chanted in the old tongue, their voices rising and falling like waves against stone. The Emperor's voice slithered through the darkness, each word dripping with cruel certainty. He called her nothing, a scavenger girl, alone and afraid, but she didn't have to be. Strike him down, he promised, and his spirit would pass into her. As all the Sith lived in him, she would be Empress. They would be one. Rey's chest heaved as visions crashed into her mind with violent clarity. She saw Finn, bloodied and broken beneath a Star Destroyer's cannons, Poe's X-Wing exploding in a brilliant fireball, Chewbacca's agonizing roar as stormtroopers executed him, Rose, BB-8, all of them, dying, screaming, calling out for her. You feel it, don't you? Your birthright. Your true nature. You're not a Skywalker, trying desperately to be something you're not. You are a Palpatine. Rey's lightsaber lowered slightly. The truth of it burned through her veins like acid. All her life, she'd been nobody. Then suddenly, she was somebody. Somebody terrible. But what if terrible was what the galaxy needed? What if the Jedi way, the endless cycle of restraint and failure, had led them here? Luke had failed. Leia had failed. The Republic had failed. The Emperor corrected her when she spoke of saving her friends. She could rule them, he said, as was her destiny. Rey looked at her lightsaber, the weapon of a Jedi. How many Jedi had wielded their sabers in the name of peace, only to watch the galaxy burn anyway? She thought of Ben, Kylo Ren, and their connection. He'd told her once that they could rule together, bring order to the chaos. She'd refused then, clinging to old ideologies, but he'd been right about one thing. The past needed to die. Show me. Show me my true power. Palpatine's laughter filled the Citadel, a sound like grinding bones and dying stars. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you're enjoying this content so far, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch these videos without subscribing. Imagine what we could accomplish if everyone subscribed. We thank you all for your continued support. Ben Solo crashed through the ancient stone doorway, his father's blaster still warm in his hand. He'd felt it the moment it happened, a shift in the Force so profound it nearly brought him to his knees. Rey, something had changed, something fundamental. He found her standing before the throne, but she wasn't fighting Palpatine, she was listening. Her eyes, when they turned to him, held a darkness he'd never seen before. Not the conflicted shadow he carried, but something purposeful, determined. She greeted him with new weight, new authority, telling him he was just in time. When he asked what she was doing, she moved toward him with liquid grace, claiming she was finally doing what he'd always wanted, taking her place. The Knights of Ren emerged from the shadows behind Ben, their weapons raised. Rey lifted a hand, not in defense, but in command. Kneel. To Ben's astonishment, they all did. All 6 of them dropped to one knee without hesitation. She moved close enough that he could see gold creeping into her brown eyes, placing her hand on her chest. He gasped at the power that flowed between them. She spoke of their bond, stronger now, complete. His mother's sacrifice had redeemed him, pulled him back to the light. She acknowledged, but what if the light wasn't enough? What if it never was? When Ben protested that Palpatine was manipulating her, she cut him off. For the first time, she claimed, she could see clearly. The Jedi, the Sith, they were both wrong. But together, she and Ben could be something new, something better. Her thumb traced his scar, the one she'd given him, as she whispered words that echoed his own from what felt like a lifetime ago. Join me, Ben Solo and Rey Palpatine, light and dark, Skywalker and Sith, balanced as we were meant to be. Ben looked past her to where Palpatine sat, watching with undisguised glee. The Emperor's game was obvious: corrupt them both, use them, discard them. But the power flowing between him and Rey was real. Their dyad was real. And maybe, just maybe, they were strong enough to take what they wanted and forge their own path. When he asked if they would be together, she smiled, beautiful and terrible all at once, and confirmed it. Palpatine's laughter died in his throat as Rey and Ben turned to face him as one. The old Emperor's yellowed eyes widened slightly, the first genuine emotion he'd shown. He began to speak, calling Rey his dear child, but she was already moving, her lightsaber igniting with a violent hiss. Ben flanked her, and the Force itself seemed to bend around them, creating a vortex of power that made the ancient stones of the Citadel groan. Did you really think a Palpatine would share power? The Sith Eternal gasped collectively as she struck, not with the desperate rage of a Jedi fighting for survival, but with the calculated precision of a Sith claiming her inheritance. Ben moved in perfect synchronization, their Force dyad allowing them to fight as one being with two bodies. Palpatine raised his withered hands, and lightning erupted forth, but it met a wall of Force energy that Rey and Ben created together. The electricity crackled and sparked, reflecting back at its master. The Emperor snarled, his voice multiplying as the spirits of all the Sith rose to his defense, declaring himself to be all the Sith. Rey responded that they were something more. She reached out through the Force, not calling on the Jedi as she once might have, but drawing on something else, the raw, unfiltered power of the dyad. More than that, she drew upon the ancient Sith knowledge that flowed in her blood, techniques lost for millennia, ways to unravel a Force spirit itself. Ben's hand found hers, and together they pulled. Palpatine's essence, the collected darkness of 1,000 generations of Sith, began to unravel. His scream echoed through the Force itself as Rey and Ben didn't just strike him down, they absorbed him. The knowledge, the power, the terrible wisdom of the Sith, all of it flowed into them like water into a vessel. The rule of two is fulfilled. The apprentices have surpassed the master. With a final agonizing shriek, Darth Sidious dissolved into nothingness, but his power, his essence, settled into Rey and Ben like sediment in still water. They stood in the aftermath, breathing hard, their hands still clasped. The Sith Eternal fell to their knees as one, chanting Empress and Emperor in unison. Rey turned to face them, and when she smiled, it was with the confidence of someone who had just inherited the galaxy. Above Exegol, the Resistance fleet watched in horror as the impossible happened. The Final Order Star Destroyers, instead of falling silent under Palpatine's death, began to move with renewed purpose. Their planet-killing weapons powered down, but their engines roared to life. Poe's desperate voice crackled over the comm, asking Finn if he was seeing this. Finn stood frozen at the viewport, his nascent Force senses screaming warnings. He couldn't feel Rey anymore, not the way she was. On the surface of Exegol, Rey stood before the assembled masses of the Sith Eternal and the Final Order's ground forces. Ben stood beside her, his presence dark but stabilizing, two halves of a terrible whole. She raised her hand, and her voice, amplified by the Force, reached every ship, every soldier, every soul in the fleet. The Emperor is dead. Long live the Empire. The declaration sent shockwaves through the Force. On Agen Kloss, Leia Organa's body finally released its hold on life, her last breath a whisper of her son's name. The Resistance fighters felt their generals passing, but there was no time to mourn. Poe commanded all ships to retreat immediately, his voice thick with disbelief and grief, but it was too late. The Final Order fleet moved with perfect coordination, surrounding the Resistance forces. They didn't fire, though. Instead, Rey's voice echoed across all channels, offering the Resistance fighters a choice. Join the new order they would build, or flee now and never return. She gave them one standard hour to decide. This can't be happening! This can't be Rey! But as he reached out through the Force, he felt her, changed, darker, but undeniably Rey. And beside her, Ben Solo, not redeemed to the light as his mother had hoped, but balanced in darkness with Rey. Rose grabbed his arm, insisting they had to go, had to regroup. As the Resistance fleet scattered, jumping to hyperspace in different directions to avoid total annihilation, Rey stood on the bridge of the Steadfast, the massive Star Destroyer that would become her mobile throne. Ben stood beside her, watching the stars. He noted quietly that they would be back. Rey's hand found his as she replied to let them come. They had work to do. The hidden base on Bespin was a far cry from the hope-filled gathering on Agen Kloss. Barely 300 souls remained of the Resistance, huddled in the forgotten mining tunnels beneath Cloud City. Finn stood before them, the weight of unexpected leadership crushing his shoulders. He announced simply that Leia was gone, and fresh tears fell from already red eyes. Poe was leading what's left of their fleet, keeping mobile, staying hidden. Lando was reaching out to old contacts, trying to find allies. And Rey, voices from the crowd erupted, some calling her a betrayer, others suggesting Palpatine had revealed who she really was. Rose stepped forward, chin raised defiantly, insisting that what mattered wasn't what Rey had become, but what they would do now. The galaxy was falling under Sith Empire control, system after system surrendering without a fight. When someone despaired about their chances, 300 people against an entire galaxy, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. A blue shimmer appeared before them. Luke Skywalker materialized, his Force ghost emanating sadness, but also determination. You do what the rebellion always did. You survive. You inspire. You remind the galaxy that there's another way. Finn asked if Luke could reach Rey, turn her back. Luke's expression darkened as he explained he'd tried, but she'd closed herself off, wrapped in Ben's presence. They were feeding off each other, growing stronger, but Luke saw something in Finn, the Force awakening in him. When Finn protested he was no Jedi, Luke agreed, but you might be something new, something they won't see coming. Ben Solo stood alone on the observation deck of the Finalizer, watching the stars wheel past as they traveled through hyperspace. He felt the familiar chill before he heard his uncle's voice calling his name. He didn't turn, acknowledging Luke with a single word. Luke Skywalker's ghost stood beside him, looking out at the same stars, speaking of how Leia had died believing Ben could be saved. Ben replied coldly that he had been saved. Rey had saved him from the conflict, from the pain of being torn between light and dark. Now he was whole. Luke countered that Ben was enslaved, just as his grandfather had been. But Ben turned to face his uncle's ghost with disdain. He claimed that he and Rey had transcended the ancient religion. They were neither Sith nor Jedi, but something new. When Luke tried to argue about the cost, about enslaving systems and killing those who resist, Ben spoke of bringing order and peace. No more wars between light and dark, just power, properly wielded. My father is dead, by my hand. That's the past. Rey and I are the future. Before Luke could respond, Rey entered the observation deck. Her presence in the Force was like a dark sun, and Luke's ghost actually recoiled from it. She addressed him with disdain, asking if he was still haunting the living. When Luke pleaded that this wasn't her, that the Rey he trained was different, she snapped back that the Rey he trained was weak, afraid, desperate for belonging and purpose. But she had both now. She moved to stand beside Ben, their hands intertwining. The gesture was both tender and terrible, their combined presence making Luke's form waver. She commanded him to leave, declaring that his time was over, that the age of Skywalker had ended. The Force isn't finished with you yet, either of you. And with that, he faded away. Ben and Rey stood together in the darkness, watching the stars, both acknowledging he would return but dismissing the threat. 1 year, that's all it had taken for the galaxy to fall. The HoloNet broadcasts played the same message on every frequency. By decree of Empress Rey and Emperor Ben, the Sith Empire brings order to chaos. Submit and prosper, resist and perish. On Coruscant, the old Jedi Temple had been transformed into something else entirely. Black pyramidal structures rose from its foundations and red banners bearing the new Empire's symbol. 2 lightsabers crossed beneath a star, hung from every building. The Senate building stood empty, a monument to failed democracy. Stormtroopers had been reconditioned into something more fearsome, Sith Legionnaires, their armor black with red accents, trained not just in combat, but in absolute loyalty through dark side conditioning. Each squad was led by Force-sensitive commanders, beings Rey and Ben had awakened to their potential and turned to their cause. In the throne room that had once belonged to Palpatine, Rey sat studying ancient Sith texts while Ben paced, reviewing military positions across the galaxy. Their rule was different from the old Empire, more efficient, more absolute. Where Palpatine had ruled through fear alone, they ruled through a combination of power and promise. Join them and share in the galaxy's wealth. Resist and face annihilation. The Mandalorian systems are proving difficult. Send the 7th Legion, make an example of one city, the rest will fall in line. It was Finn who proved to be their most persistent irritation. The former stormtrooper had become a symbol of resistance, broadcasting messages of hope from hidden locations, leading raids on Empire supply lines. But more troubling were the reports of him displaying Force abilities, untrained but powerful. Ben reported that Finn was gathering the defected stormtroopers, thousands of them, hidden across the Outer Rim. Rey finally looked up, her gold eyes gleaming with a new idea. Perhaps it was time they offered him something more appealing than rebellion. The vision came to Finn in the middle of the night, so vivid he couldn't tell if he was dreaming or if Rey was actually there. She stood before him, looking almost like the Rey he remembered, except for the darkness that clung to her like a second skin. She greeted him casually, and when he scrambled for his blaster, she laughed, a sound both familiar and wrong. She explained she wasn't really there, just visiting through the Force. When he demanded to know what she wanted, she moved closer in the vision, offering him what she claimed he'd always wanted: purpose, power, family. I can feel the Force in you. It's strong, untrained, but strong. I could teach you. Ben and I both could. You could stand beside us, help us shape the galaxy. Finn protested that she was offering another empire, another tyranny, but Rey corrected him. She offered something that worked. No more war, no more children taken from their families to be stormtroopers, no more planets destroyed for political gain, just order and peace. He felt the pull of her words, the seductive promise of them. When he accused her of killing innocent people, she calmly corrected that they had killed only those who refused peace. She knew him, she insisted. She wouldn't offer this if she didn't believe it was right. I knew you, but that Rey, the real Rey, she's gone. You're just wearing her face. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Hurt? Regret? But it was gone so quickly, he couldn't be sure. She withdrew, telling him the offer stood. When he was tired of watching friends die for a lost cause, he would know where to find them. The vision shattered and Finn woke, gasping in his bunk. Poe was shaking him, concerned about his screaming. When Finn explained Rey had been in his head trying to recruit him, Poe's expression hardened, suggesting they needed to move, but Finn knew she wasn't coming. Not yet. Lando appeared in the doorway with a grim realization. If Rey wanted Finn, maybe he was the key to stopping her. Finn felt the Force stirring within him, untrained but growing stronger every day. He'd been studying with Luke's ghost, learning from ancient texts Lando had discovered, even meditating with recordings of Yoda's teachings. He'd constructed his own lightsaber, not blue like a Jedi's or red like a Sith's, but pure white, representing something new. 3 years had passed since Exegol, 3 years of the Sith Empire's rule, 3 years of the Resistance becoming something more, a true rebellion, with Finn at its heart. He stood now in the ruins of the old Jedi temple on Ossus, a lightsaber in his hand. Not a Jedi's weapon, but something new, its blade a brilliant white. Across from him stood Ben Solo, his crossguard saber humming with unstable energy. Ben acknowledged that Finn had learned much, asking if he was self-taught. Finn replied cryptically that he'd had help, from Luke among others. Behind Ben, Rey floated in meditation, her consciousness elsewhere, maintaining battle meditation over the Empire's forces as they clashed with the Rebellion fleet in orbit. This was their moment, their one chance. They clashed, sabers meeting in explosive bursts of energy. Ben was more skilled, more experienced, but Finn had something else. The fury of the freed slave, the determination of the underdog, the hope of the hopeless. As they fought, Luke's ghost materialized beside Rey's meditating form. Other spirits joined him. Yoda, Obi-Wan, even Anakin Skywalker. Together they reached out, trying to penetrate the dark shell she'd built around herself. Rey's eyes snapped open, burning with golden fire. She rose, her physical form blurring as she fought on a spiritual plane, her dark power lashing out at the assembled Jedi spirits. Drawing on the ancient Sith knowledge she'd absorbed from Palpatine, she wielded techniques that could harm even Force ghosts. "You abandoned me, trained me just enough to be useful, then left me to face my grandfather alone." Luke tried to apologize, to explain he'd failed her, but she struck again with devastating force. Using forbidden Sith techniques that attacked the very essence of a Force spirit, she did the impossible, destroyed Luke's Force ghost, severing his connection to the living Force entirely. The other ghosts recoiled in shock. The feedback hit Ben like a physical blow, and Finn pressed his advantage, his white blade scoring under Ben's shoulder. Ben fell to one knee, looking up at Finn with something almost like respect. He told Finn to do it, to strike him down and be the hero. "There's still good in you. I can feel it." Ben explained slowly, painfully, that the good in him was what had allowed Rey to fall. His love for her, their bond, it had corrupted them both, or saved them both, depending on perspective. Before Finn could respond, Rey appeared beside them, moving faster than thought, her lightsaber at Finn's throat. The throne room of the Sith Empire's capital ship had become a battlefield of ideology. Finn stood defiant, his white lightsaber held steady despite Rey's blade at his throat. Ben remained on one knee, his wound bleeding but not fatal. Around them, the Force itself seemed to hold its breath. Rey spoke with genuine disappointment. Finn could have been one of them, could have had everything, but Finn countered that everything meant nothing without freedom. When Rey laughed bitterly about what freedom had given the galaxy, war, chaos, death, and claimed they had ended that, Finn stood firm. They had replaced it with slavery. The argument escalated, Rey insisting they'd brought the natural order Palpatine understood, the order the Jedi had denied. When Finn challenged what would happen when someone stronger came along, when their empire fell like every empire before it, silence fell. Ben spoke from his position on one knee, explaining with dark certainty that their empire wouldn't fall. They weren't repeating the mistakes of the past. The rule of two had evolved, no longer master and apprentice, but Rey and himself, dark and light intertwined, neither consuming the other. They were eternal. Nothing is eternal, not even you. The battle in orbit had reached its crescendo. The Rebellion fleet, larger now, strengthened by systems that had found their courage, pressed hard against the Empire's forces, but Rey's battle meditation gave her forces an insurmountable advantage. Every move was coordinated, every attack perfectly timed. Rey gave Finn a final ultimatum: join them and live, or refuse and die. Those were the only options, but Finn felt it then, a presence in the Force. Not a ghost, but something else. The living Force itself, speaking through him. He declared there was always another choice, then moved faster than he ever had before, his white blade swirling. Not to attack Rey or Ben, but to strike the meditation focus Rey had been using to coordinate her fleet. The ancient Sith artifact shattered, and Rey screamed as the feedback tore through her consciousness. Ben caught her as she fell, and for a moment, his mask slipped. The love there was real. Twisted perhaps, but real. He called her name desperately as she gasped. her golden eyes flickering back to brown momentarily, whispering about the fleet. Without her battle meditation, the Empire's forces faltered. The rebellion pressed their advantage. Star Destroyers began to fall. "You've doomed the galaxy to chaos again." "This isn't over." Rey and Ben exchanged a look, a conversation passing between them that only their Force dyad could understand. Then, without another word, they vanished, not in death, but in retreat. Their personal ship launched from the hangar, jumping to hyperspace before anyone could stop them. Some say they fled to the unknown regions to build their empire anew. Others believe they're still out there, waiting, planning, their dark presence a constant reminder that the balance between light and dark is always precarious. The rebellion claimed victory that day, but Finn knew better. Rey and Ben were still out there, still connected, still dangerous. The galaxy was free, for now, but freedom, Finn had learned, was something that had to be fought for, again and again, generation after generation. The cycle continued, not because it had to, but because people chose it. And choice, in the end, was what separated freedom from tyranny, light from dark, hope from despair. As Finn stood in the empty throne room, his white lightsaber extinguished, he felt the Force moving around him, through him. Not light, not dark, but something in between. Something new. The age of the Sith Empire had ended. The age of the New Republic would begin. But the Force was eternal, always seeking balance, always in motion. And somewhere in the unknown regions, two figures stood together on the bridge of a lone ship, their hands intertwined, their destiny unwritten. The dark and the light, forever bound, forever conflicted, forever one. The Skywalker saga had ended not in triumph or tragedy, but in uncertainty. And perhaps that was the most fitting end of all. Not a conclusion, but a question. What happens when love and power intertwine? When salvation becomes damnation? When heroes fall and villains rise? The answer was written in the stars, waiting for someone brave enough to read it. If you enjoyed this journey into the shadows of what might have been, remember to hit that subscribe button and join us for more explorations of the infinite possibilities within that galaxy far, far away. May the Force be with you, always.